Colossus is the most advanced lineup optimizer in daily fantasy sports. Lock and exclude players. Adjust player exposure to reduce risk of injury or poor performance. Customize individual projections or upload your own projections. Generate hundreds of optimal lineups in seconds. Name and save the best lineups. Create winning lineups for the top sites like DraftKings and FanDuel for free at dailyfantasycafe.com.
Hello and welcome to the FanDuel Punch-Out. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Josh Shepardson at Beachhead 50. We're talking about tonight's action, only 9 games, so a decent Saturday night. Obviously, we got a lot of sports going on, so your Saturday night will be full of watching lots of sports. But you're going to be starting off here by deciding which starting pitcher you like because there's no obvious top-notch guy. We do have Felix Hernandez at $11,000, who, earlier this season, maybe last season, you look at him at $11,000 at Oakland, and you just go ahead and slot him into your lineup. But he pitched well in his last start against this same team. He does have a very good track record against Oakland throughout his career and these batters. But at the same time, it's just a guy that I don't feel comfortable paying $11,000 for, a guy that doesn't seem to have a big ceiling. He doesn't have a Kershaw-type ceiling or even a DeGrom type of ceiling. He probably will give you a quality start in 15 to 17 points, but at $11,000, that's not helping you out a whole lot.
No, I think what Felix's production this year has been, it doesn't line up with the cost of rostering him at this point. You're basically paying for security, and I don't know about you, but I'll sacrifice some security to get some extra bats in my lineup, and
some upside.
Yeah, I mean he's the only pitcher in 5 figures tonight on FanDuel. The next closest, Danny Salazar, actually looks really good to me in GPPs at $9,900. Much higher ceiling, bigger strikeout upside. Struck out 10 in his last start. Hasn't struck out less than 5 in 5 straight starts. I mean, the guy just punches out batter after batter. Does have some home run issues on occasion. So guys like Miguel Cabrera and JD Martinez scare you just a little bit, but still like Salazar a lot in GPPs. Tyson Ross looks fairly safe against a Dodgers lineup that really isn't punishing the baseball of late. And Ross has been very good this year. Does have some issues with walks, but hasn't walked more than 3 batters in more than a half dozen starts, it looks like. Consistently striking out batters, pitching a handful of innings every start. Not going super deep like some of these more efficient pitchers. But he's also not getting chased before 5 innings. So he's kind of in that fringe area of 5 to 7 innings. You're going to get a punch out per inning. And at $9,200, it's not bad because the upside is there for 7 and 7 strikeouts, and you take that.
Yeah.
Really like Lance McCullers at home against Minnesota tonight. Minnesota, the worst road offense in baseball. McCullers was sharp in his first start back from AAA, and then followed up with another decent start against these very Twins. 6 strikeouts, 6 innings, allowed 8 base runners, was worth 9 FanDuel points. Want a little bit more at $9,000, but still, that was at Minnesota. They're much better at home than on the road. And then the last pricey-ish name that I'll throw out there is Derek Holland, who was brilliant in his last start. And through 9 innings, struck out 11, allowed just 3 hits, picked up the win, 24 FanDuel points, has gone 6 innings or more in all 3 of his starts since getting activated from the disabled list. Has only walked 1 batter. His control was brilliant last year. Looks like that's carrying over to this year. Really like Holland. Really like the fact that he's facing an Angels squad that's just been scuffling all second half.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much. I'm paying up at pitcher for the most part, but there's one cheap name that I like, and there's one really cheap name that you like. I like Alex Wood at $7,700. I think that he gives you that balance of a fairly high floor, not the highest ceiling in the world, but you're probably going to get your 10 to 12 points from him. And at $7,700, maybe you'd like a little bit more from him. But I just don't see a lot of guys with 20 fantasy point upside. It's more of the 14 to 17 point range. Yeah. I'll sacrifice a few points to get those extra bats in my lineup. So $7,700 Alex Wood is the cheap arm that I like. But there's a really cheap arm that you brought up before the show, and definitely merit to using him. Who's that?
Yeah, this guy is a GPP only type of play, of course, and this is going to be so you can fit in your Coors bats and every other big bat you want. But Brad Hand has actually been pretty good this season. He's $6,000. Not a guy that's great at anything, but he's pretty good across the board. He's got right around a 49% ground ball rate. Doesn't allow many home runs, .44 per 9. 16% strikeout rate you don't love. It's obviously below average, but only a 5.3% walk rate. So, I mean, he's the guy who's slightly above average or average in just about every way. And it's a Mets offense that hits right-handed pitching much better than they hit left-handed pitching. So, I mean, for me, Brad Hand, if I'm trying to stack a bunch of big bats, he's the guy I'm going with. Certainly not a cash game option. I think, for me, if I have to pick of all these guys you mentioned for cash games, it's probably going to be Tyson Ross because, I mean, he's among the league leaders in ground ball rate, home runs per 9, hard contact rate. Does a great job of not allowing hard contact. So all those things factored in with, like you said, a struggling offense. So, and in the best pitcher's park in baseball, well, arguably, depending on who you ask now. But I mean, I just like Tyson Ross a lot tonight.
Yeah, I like that call. I think I agree with your assessment that he's basically the safest bet of the bunch. So in cash games, I have no problem paying for him. And then with Hand, like you mentioned, that pitcher's park is exactly what it is. I mean, Marlins ballpark in Miami. Definitely another reason to like him at such a cheap price. So I'm with you.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out one more guy also, Jesse Chavez. We know he does have some upside. I know you like Jesse Chavez. It's not a very good matchup against the Seattle team that hits right-handed pitching well, but that should drive down his ownership. And obviously, pitching at home at O.co, definitely a good place where even if you do make a mistake, you're not necessarily going to have to pay for it. It's a huge ballpark, so I like Jesse Chavez and his upside there as well.
Yeah, that's a good call. And the price point is definitely conducive to grabbing some more of those big bats, which pretty much is the theme of the show, if you haven't gathered it, is that we want these big bats. The prices on pitchers are not prohibitive to getting these big bats, and especially some of these cheaper arms.
Yep, and we'll start off with one big bat here at catcher, Buster Posey, $4,300. We know the drill by now. He's in Coors Field. Hasn't yet had a big game at Coors Field. This is the third time around. Had a double last night, but you're not paying $4,300 for a guy to hit a double. So what you're doing here is you're chasing Chad Bettis, who, as we know, has been awful against everyone. 373 WOBA allowed in righty-righty matchups. So this is the guy that certainly could get hit, and the Giants really haven't been hitting at Coors Field. So maybe this is the game they get it going. But good thing for Posey owners tonight is you've got to imagine some people already be off it. 2 days of the Giants letting them down, then maybe they just go ahead and move on. So the Giants, as far as the Coors Field series go, might be pretty low owned tonight.
Yeah, I mean, they have been a disappointment for DFS gamers the last couple of nights, so you hope that suppresses the ownership. If you're going to pay up, he's clearly the guy. You can pay for d'Arnaud and some GPPs. He does get a lefty, which is nice. He'll have the platoon advantage there, but $3,800 for a guy that's playing at Marlins Park is not something that I'm ecstatic about rolling with. Hundley's a fine play against Peavy, but I just always have a hard time paying for him. The ceiling isn't that great. He doesn't hit in the heart of that Rockies order. He kind of is, especially with them healthy now, he just keeps getting bumped further and further down that lineup, which further diminishes his appeal. But it is at Coors Field. Peavy, we're not talking about peak years Jake Peavy here, so there is some merit to using him. Evan Gattis is moderately interesting at $3,100. Big power, he's at home. Irvin Santana hasn't exactly been shining since he's come back from his pet suspension, so I don't mind using Gattis. He unlike Hundley, has a nice lineup spot, typically hitting cleanup for the Astros, so I do like Gattis a bit, but this is mostly a punt position for me tonight. One more name that is up near the top pricing that I have some interest in, Derek Norris at $2,900. He does have a nice track record of punishing left-handed pitching, so I don't mind using him against Alex Wood. But my favorite punt situation tonight is grabbing whoever starts for the White Sox, whether that's Flowers or Soto. Both are right-handed. Both will be facing left-hand. Whichever starter. Catcher starts will be facing left-handed Danny Duffy. Duffy not very good against righty, so I don't mind chasing some pop, maybe chasing a double or a homer from one of them. But there is a $2,600 catcher who you like, and I'm on board with as well, even though he doesn't hold the platoon advantage.
Yeah, that's Yan Gomes at $2,600, like you mentioned. Fredo Simon has been much better throughout his career against righties than lefties. Still overall has good numbers this year, but if you look at the past 30 days, it's been a big-time train wreck for Fredo Simon. 1.80 home runs per 9, strikeout rate of 8.9% with a walk rate of 9.6. Allowing over 30% hard contact rate, swing strike rate of 6.5. I mean, those are Dan Herron type numbers. So when you're putting up numbers like that, I mean, you got to pick on him. And I know you love the Indians tonight too.
I do.
Yep, absolutely. And really nobody else at catcher that stands out to me. It's a pretty bad position tonight. First base options, if you want to pay up and ride with the hot hand, certainly don't blame you. But it's Ryan Zimmerman. It's against Shelby Miller, who seems incapable of getting a win, which is why the win is a stupid statistic. But either way, Ryan Zimmerman at 4,800, a tough matchup, yes. But as far as first baseman on this slate, he's been by far the best of any of these guys recently.
Yeah, I mean, he's been locked in, and the fact that it's a righty-righty matchup should serve to suppress his ownership. But like you said, if you want to chase the hot hand, I'm going to guess Zimmerman's ownership is going to be fairly low because he is pricey, and it is a righty-righty matchup. So there is actually some contrarian qualities to selecting him, I think, at first base, even though he is a hot hand, and typically in the DFS world, that means high ownership, but I just don't see that being the case with Zimmerman. There's some other hot hands that are also expensive elsewhere that we will get to who should have higher ownership. The guys that I'm looking at tonight mostly are going to be of the cheaper variety. Jose Abreu at 36 looks good to me against Danny Duffy. $3,500 Justin Morneau made his return last night. I like getting myself some Coors bats on the cheap. A lefty against Jake Peavy looks pretty good. Ben Paulson at 32 is also looking pretty good. He was in left field last night with Morneau back at first. As long as they continue to try him out in the outfield, I'm fine with using Paulson. And then Prince Fielder at $3,000 is another option that I like. Jared Weaver, I mean, what can you say about him? The guy's trying to get by with smoke and mirrors basically at this point in his career, and Fielder's done pretty significant damage to right-handed pitching this year. So smoke and mirrors pitcher like Jared Weaver should have little success against Fielder tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Like you said, not a guy that's been having a ton of upside, but really at that price tag, you don't need much. And your upside's kind of provided for you by facing such a terrible pitcher. So Albert Pujols, another guy at 3,500. You mentioned Holland. He has pitched very well, but Pujols certainly a guy with some big upside. As far as really cheap guys, no thanks for me. There's just it's a situation at first base like it is a lot of times on less than a full slate. Really nobody that stands out as a cheap play.
No, I mean, the closest thing that I'll give is Justin Bour against Bartolo Colon. 2,600. Basically, Bour's all or nothing at this point. I don't love it, but I also don't love first base as a whole tonight. So if you really want to stock up, say, at the hot corner in the outfield where you've got some big bats, you're going to have to save some money somewhere. Maybe spinning down to Justin Bour at 26 is that option, but with Fielder priced so close at $3,000, it's really hard for me to justify doing that other than maybe on a single bullet GPP team. Yeah,
absolutely there. Second base options here. J.C. Kipnis stands out as the best play if you ask me, and I think you're on board there. $3,400 against Simon, who we mentioned has struggled against lefties. Kipnis kind of was on a tear when he first came off of the DL, but struggled a little bit recently. I'm not worried about that. I'm loving this cheap price tag in this matchup, so I think he's easily your top option when you factor in price. D. Gordon, another guy with some big strikeout. He does not have big strikeout upside, actually, not been striking out hardly at all, but has big stolen base upside against Bartolo Colon in his molasses slow delivery, whatever you want to call it. It's embarrassing how slow he throws the baseball now, but D. Gordon, I mean, he could walk to second base tonight if he gets on against Colon.
Yeah, I mean, second base looks really good with those two headlining it. Kipnis, I'm with you, top play. I think he's one of the chalkier plays tonight, but also one of the better plays in general, and so that's fine by me. I still like Rougned Odor again. I don't mind picking on Jared Weaver a little bit. Beyond them, not a ton that I'm in love with. You can spin down to Chase Utley. He's been good with the Dodgers. The bats come alive. He hits in a good lineup spot, hitting second for them typically. $2,700 is a pretty solid price point. And then Jed Jerko at $2,600 against a lefty. He's hit left-handed pitching hard this year. He's hit left-handed pitching well throughout his career. And he's got a homer in 2 straight games, so you've got some hot bat working. He's got a nice little 7-game hit streak going as well. So if you want to chase recent performance, Jerko's got that going for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely like that call. Those are the cheap guys I'm looking at as well. Another one of those positions where there's some guys up top that you like. Brian Dozier against McCullers is a fine option, but this is one of those slates. I mean, you just don't love it. You might as well just go with the top options at these big offenses, who we'll be getting to quite a few of them starting right now, actually, with Nolan Arenado at $5,200. I'm not sure what the MLB record is, but I believe it's 6 straight games, or at least modern day era, for consecutive home runs. Is that right?
I'm not sure. We'd have to check with Elias.
Yeah, I'll have to find that out. But if I'm not mistaken, I feel like it's 6, or if not 6, I mean, I can't imagine it being much more than that. So either way, Arenado at 5 straight games with a homer. Going to be hard not to bet on him getting another one against Jake Peavy tonight, who you mentioned. Not peak years Jake Peavy, not even close. So if not Nolan Arenado, you and I are both in agreement, though. David Wright is easily your next option, $3,500 against the lefty.
Yeah, Wright's been a lefty killer throughout his career. And one other interesting nugget with that Arenado 5-game home run streak, it's also a 5-game multi-hit streak. So it's not just boom and then out. Like, he's boom and then adding more. It's been an unbelievable ride for Arenado lately. So worth the money, but if you're spending down, maybe because you need to stick his teammate in the outfield and you can't quite squeeze the rest of your bats in there, Wright looks pretty good at $3,500. The only other names that I'm really looking at third base beyond them, there aren't many, but I would consider Derek Dietrich at $29. He's crushed right-handed pitching this year. And then Lonnie Chisenhall, I mean, I don't mind picking on Alfredo Simon with any and every left-handed bat from the Indians that I can get in my lineup, because that's probably my favorite stack of the night. They've got a number of left-handed bats that are just going to give Alfredo Simon fits. And Vegas has taken note. The odds makers are throwing a 4.5 run total on that the Indians team over-under total. So I definitely want some pieces. Granted, third base isn't necessarily where I want to get it, because I don't want to come off of Arenado or Wright. But if you're paying up for some of these other Coors bats elsewhere, again, namely the outfield is really where we're looking at Coors. I don't mind moving down to, say, Chisenhall.
Yeah, you might as well use the future Hall of Famer and Lonnie Chisenhall.
Yeah.
In that regard. And I did look up that stat now. The number is actually 8. Ken Griffey Jr. got 8. Don Mattingly also got 8. And Jim Thome has 7. So Nolan Arenado's got a couple days to catch up. If we're talking total home runs, maybe Carlos Gonzalez closing that gap there pretty quick. But either way, you know I love Lonnie Chisenhall tonight and every other night. Trevor Plouffe, $2,400, another guy that I'm looking at because he's cheap. It is righty-righty, and he's better against lefties, but he has fine numbers against righties. McCullers' biggest weakness is hard contact, so if you need an absolute punt play, I think that Plouffe is easily my favorite. I want to look at guys like Luis Valbuena, but he's just been so awful the past few months. I mean, he still has the home run upside, but I'm not sure where it went. It's around somewhere. Yeah. I'm not sure that it's still in his hands, though. All right, moving on to shortstop, where I kind of wish we could just skip past shortstop. I almost want to just play someone who's not playing, so I guarantee I don't get a -1 here. But if you're paying up, I mean, it's obvious. Jose Reyes, Brandon Crawford, those are the two guys you want. Carlos Correa, of course, your non-Coors bat. But outside of that, I'm going to want to save money because there's really just well, you mentioned Francisco Lindor. I think that's a good call up there, switch hitter against Simon. But outside of that, as we do every day, seems like you just look at a guy like Alcides Escobar at minimum salary. You don't like it, but he's just there, and he's at the top of a lineup that should score some runs, and that's about all you can ask out of a guy at $2,200 with really no other viable options at that price.
Yeah, I mean, this is mostly a punt position today, but the punts look quite ugly. Escobar is going to be a pretty popular play, but again, I'm okay with jumping on that. At the minimum salary, you get a leadoff hitter for an explosive offense, so I'm fine with that. A couple more decent names near the top. If Wilmer Flores is in the lineup, he did pinch hit last night. He gets a lefty. He's crushed lefties this year. I'm okay with spending $31 on him. I don't love it, but if you've got a little bit of extra money jingling around, you can go ahead and throw that on Flores. And Corey Seager, if he's in the lineup again, he's gotten off to quite the hot start with the Dodgers. 4 hits in his first 2 games. Gotta like what he's doing. Has the prospect pedigree, so it's not a shocker that he's coming in and having success right away. $3,100. You don't love the matchup with Ross, but he does at least hold the platoon advantage there. So I'm okay with using Corey Seager. But again, make sure that he's in the lineup. It's possible he gets a day off. You never know. He's only been up for a few days, and they do have quite the log jam in that infield now.
Yeah, the logjam that Trace Utley said he would absolutely not be a part of. So either way. But moving on to outfield, where there are a ton of options and there's a lot of good expensive options. Carlos Gonzalez, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's the guy you should have been playing last night and the night before, and you should be playing him today as well. $5,600. His price keeps creeping up, as it should, though. A pathetic 5.25 points last night. All he hit was one home run. We're used to this guy hitting 2 home runs a game, so maybe he finally gets it together and hits 2 again tonight. But either way, all in jest, Carlos Gonzalez is easily your top play in the outfield. You got Bryce Harper, still pretty cheap in his matchup. Doesn't see a whole lot of strikes, but when he does, he hits them hard. Lorenzo Cain and Ben Zobrist, 2 more guys. Zobrist still sticking down there cheap at 4Ks. Cain got a little bit of a bump to 4,400. And then, of course, the Indians love Michael Brantley up there. Gotta love him in this matchup, too.
Yeah, that price point, 4,300, not bad for a guy who's been crushing the ball in the second half with being Brantley I'm talking about. You can also look at Charlie Blackmon, 4,900. Pretty pricey, but cheap arms tonight, man. It's not going to be hard to get some of these expensive bats in your lineup. Looking beyond the top names that you threw out there, I like J.D. Martinez as a contrarian play against Danny Salazar. I expect Salazar to be fairly popular tonight. J.D. Martinez can turn around a fastball. He can turn around a lot of pitches. And at $3,400, I'll chase that power just a little bit. Shin-Soo Choo looks really good in a matchup against Jared Weaver. He's been good against righties this year. He typically gets a good lineup spot against them as well. $3,200, pretty easy price tag to fit on your lineups. And then Trace Thompson looks pretty good at $3,000 as well. He's absolutely hammered lefties at big league level so far. We're dealing with a small sample size, but he hit lefties hard in the minors as well. So I'm buying what he's selling. He gets Danny Duffy today, so I like that matchup for him quite a bit. And then, again, the outfield, not the greatest position for paying down at. Maybe you pay for Johnny Gomes, lefty specialist, chase some power against Jose Quintana. But Quintana's a tough lefty, so I don't love that. And as you and I talked about before the show, the bargain bin is pretty much bare here. If Andre Ethier's out again, you'd expect Carl Crawford to be in. As a left-handed batter, he's going to hold the platoon advantage against Tyson Ross, and probably more importantly, if he gets on base, expect him to be off to the races because Tyson Ross just does not control the running game at all. So Crawford has some appeal, but beyond that, the bargain bin is empty, and it is ugly.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I will throw out a few guys that I've got. Not quite bargain bin plays, but Marcell Ozuna and Christian Yelich, both guys against Bartolo Colon. I think that's a viable stack. He did pitch well in his last start, but seemingly only very good against the Phillies this season. Johnny Gomes, of course, against the lefty. And then Ichiro Suzuki, another cheap guy. So there's just not a whole lot down there tonight. It's a good thing we're not paying for pitching.
Yeah, I guess the only other name that I would throw out there is Mitch Moreland, who is outfield eligible. Typically hits in a decent lineup spot for the Rangers. Will hold the platoon advantage against Jared Weaver. You can certainly do worse than him at $2,300, but he's basically that needle in a haystack down there in that bargain bin. There's just not a lot to pick from.
No, not at all. And that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.